Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave, and of course, to all of USAS and the Alabama Cooperative Extension for inviting me today to give an overview of our CAHPS program, which is the Comprehensive Aquaculture Health Program Standards. And I am mortified to now realize that the logo I'm using on the cover slide is our older logo, but it is CAHPS is the Comprehensive Aquaculture Health Program Standards. As we move through today, I will be happy to take questions at the end of our time together this afternoon. So with that, I do want to recognize all of my colleagues and friends, both on the APHIS side with veterinary services, as well as with NAA, and all the representatives from the farming community that for the past, it's incredible to know this, but 8 years we have been working on CAHPS now to get it to this point and be so supportive that now we have CAHPS waiting on the docket in the rulemaking process for APHIS. So while this will remain a voluntary program, we are looking forward to the day when it will be a codified program within the USDA portfolio. All right, with that, the current challenges that CAHPS was designed to address are the ones that you see here now. Right now, we don't have a clear and transparent mechanism that allows us to verify the health status of aquatic animals moving interstate, particularly, but we've also identified challenges in assuring that the requirements by the various trading partners that we have around the world are being met and are being met with high confidence and suitable for the length of time that the certificates are valid for. We also know that we have many pathogens in the space of aquatic animal health. It is much longer, these lists of reportable diseases, production diseases, our socio-political diseases. The lists are ever increasing, and very few times have we seen a pathogen get removed from one of these lists. It is impractical and not feasible to expect that all of our farms, every time they move animals, are going to be able to test for all these pathogens. It's expensive. In some spaces, there are only molecular-based methods available to do this testing, which increases the bottom line cost of being able to do these tests repeatedly over the course of a year to demonstrate freedom. We also know that we have varying requirements, both international and interstate, based on species susceptibility, the region that the animals are being sourced from, or the region that the animals are being moved into. And so these regulations often at times can change without advance notification or warning on the part of the farmers or producers moving those animals. And of course, in real time, that can become very tricky. Also, one of the reasons that we all love and appreciate aquaculture so much is its incredible diversity. Not only do we have more animals in production around the globe than any other traditional livestock commodity, we also have the range of production methods from totally extensive to completely intensive and in protected environments. And we also have an enormous range of end uses of our animals and products that these animals contribute to. And so again, while this diversity is very enriching for this commodity, it does pose some challenges as to what are the susceptible species, what are the risks of having these different production methods, which might have open water settings versus the closed water settings, or a mix on a production site that perhaps has a blend of both of those, or a range of those opportunities there. We also know that health testing is very costly. Not only are the testing methods at the laboratories an expense themselves, but also there's the bigger picture, as has been elucidated by the great work by our Virginia Tech colleagues, Dr. Carol Engel and Jonathan Van Senten, to elucidate what contributes to these testing or fish health costs for our different sectors. And we have a much greater appreciation for all the effort that goes in to this activity on the farm. And so how can we begin to make these surveys or screenings or inspections much more efficacious and efficient in real time. And that means making the work by every person that contributes to this process more streamlined, more efficient, more practical, with definitely keeping in mind how many pathogens are being asked to be tested for, with what frequency, and to what assurance level is needed to move animals around the world safely and securely. So I think what unifies all of us is what we want out of a livestock health program. We want confidence. We want the program to have integrity. We want to avoid a rubber stamp situation where we can't verify or attest to what is being done because we haven't put the appropriate metrics in place that we know how to evaluate those conditions. We want something that is transparent so that everyone from the farming community, the regulatory community, our trading partners all understand what is being done, how it is being evaluated, and what is done in times when things go wrong, typically on a Friday at 5 o'clock, which is coming up very soon. And of course, we all want equitability across every system. We don't want a situation where one sector of this commodity has an advantage over another sector. We don't want some trading partners to have that advantage either. We want something that is equitable, but that also promotes all the awesome U.S. aquaculture, U.S. farm-raised stuff that comes with animals that are raised in our great country. And we want to promote and brand what we are doing. I recognize we all want this to be done with those 4 conditions, but also as easy as possible. And I hope everyone knows that one of the reasons it's taken us so long to get CAHPS to this point is making sure that we are building a program that has confidence, integrity, transparency, and equitability across all players. So the goal with CAHPS and the ask from the farming community was that we develop a verifiable health plan for aquatic livestock that is voluntary, even though it may become regulatory. Participation in this program is still 100% voluntary. We have other USDA programs that are exactly like this. There's a regulatory component for participants. Our ISA program is run like this. Our Scrapie program is run like this as well. But participation in the program is 100% voluntary, and we recognize that CAHPS may not be for everybody. And an initial ask about what this program should do for the farming community was minimize the burden of testing costs and make the process more efficient and have a system that increases the confidence and extends that period of confidence over time so that the repeatedness of this testing is avoided in the bigger picture. We wanted something that empowers the current on-farm practices in terms of early detection systems and biosecurity practices. We want a program that supports science and a risk-based approach such that we understand that in some cases, zero risk, zero tolerance is not possible, but that we have put practices and procedures in place that minimize to reduce that risk to an acceptable level, again, to allow our animals to thrive, but also move around the world safely and securely. Had to be flexible to all our different farming methods and diversity of aquaculture, also scalable from a very small farm to one of our large corporate farms that have perhaps networked or connected facilities in other countries that way. And the bottom line too is that we wanted to have a program that increase and boost confidence such that people and clients and customers of our farming community know and can trust and have confidence in the result and the health status of the animals they are buying or receiving. And of course, we are hopeful that this program is recognized by our trade partners as well as our domestic partners within the United States at the state and federal level. So CAHPS, again, is designed as an aquatic livestock health program that affords for the management, protection, and verification of a declared health status on the farm. We've modeled this program after other successful APHIS livestock health improvement programs, such as the National Poultry Improvement Plan and the Swine Health Improvement Plan. SHIP is a rather new program, just like CAHPS for veterinary services. And of course, NPIP is the program that many of our poultry producers in this country participate in to demonstrate and secure the movement of different life stages of the poultry sector around this country. We're going to learn in a few minutes what CAHPS consists of in terms of the 5 pillars, but I really do want folks to appreciate that the cornerstones of this program are the implementation of an early detection system on the farm, the targeted and active surveillance or official surveillance that is done with the conditions of the CAHPS program, the biosecurity practices and procedures that are on farm that are in step with the risk of these named pathogens coming onto these facilities that way. And of course, also this program could exist without APHIS oversight, but what the oversight of USDA APHIS brings is recognition and confidence in all players that are receiving these animals. It allows our farming community to know that USDA stands behind them. And when they are participating and implementing CAHPS, we have full confidence in the aquatic animal health team, the testing procedures, the biosecurity practices that are on the farm, that we are confident that these animals are moving and are meeting the criteria that are set out in any health certificate language that way. It also allows all of our partners to know that APHIS is overseeing and administering this program with our usual regulatory practices behind that as well. All right, so what is CAHPS? CAHPS is based on 5 pillars. It has multiple participation options, which I will get into in the next couple of slides. And it offers a way for APHIS and anyone else to verify that the on-farm implementation practices of CAHPS are meeting a desired or targeted health claim. What makes CAHPS so unique and stands it out from some of our other APHIS programs is that it is not specifically centered on a singular pathogen. If you look across the other APHIS programs, we've got our scrapie program, our brucellosis program, our CWD or chronic wasting disease program. Even within the NPIP program, there is that program is specific for avian influenza. And if producers want to add additional pathogens to their package, that's completely suitable. But CAHPS really is this comprehensive program that is driven by the needs of the participant in the program. What that means is that the facility that implements the plan designates what their pathogens of concern are. Those might be the WOA listed and NLRAD listed pathogens, but it could also be more of the production pathogens that are of concern. And we recognize that many of these pathogens are required for domestic movement, but are also the ones that cause the most anxiety, concern in the real-time production environment. And so how can we help farms if they need to or want to claim freedom or freedom from these pathogens that might not be at the international concern level? It also allows the aquatic animal health team of these specific sites to develop their own surveillance plan. Again, with all the needs known for the movement of these animals or the end use of these animals, what are the export, interstate, branding, marketing needs of this company, and what surveillance plan can be designed to hit all those targets and simplify this process throughout the year. And of course, then we've also got the biosecurity practices as well. Again, those practices have to commiserate and match the level of risk that is identified through the risk evaluation process within the CAHPS system. But again, those practices are designed and implemented by the farm and by their aquatic animal health team. So again, very unique. Hopefully you can begin to see that CAHPS can be built and designed for multiple different situations, multiple different farming purposes as well. All right, let's talk a little bit about these CAHPS pillars. For every participation option, the expectation is that each one of these pillars would be implemented by the participant in the program. Verification of implementation will be done by review of the standard operating procedures. For some of these, it's going to be harder. It's going to be that straightforward that we, as the reviewers and administrators of the program, that veterinary services would review these standard operating procedures to make sure that they are appropriate, again, to match what end goals of the program are trying to achieve. And of course, then we verify these through our annual site visits. The 5 pillars of CAHPS then are, of course, an aquatic animal health team, risk evaluation, which takes into consideration, again, those named pathogens by the facility, the production setting, and end use of those animals. This also hopefully takes into account what the external requirements are by this facility, so that, again, where this leads us to is a surveillance plan and a biosecurity plan that demonstrate the health status that is needed to move these animals. Early detection systems and surveillance is the 3rd pillar of CAHPS. Disease investigation and reporting. And of course, we know it's Friday afternoon, almost 5 o'clock. Stuff is going to go wrong. And when it does go wrong, how are we going to handle our response to these detections or outbreaks on these participant farms? And how are we going to recover these farms and regain that health status that perhaps was lost by a detection or outbreak of a disease on the farm? Again, each one of these has to be implemented. And just for clarity, the early detection systems, again, are the routine on-farm surveillance practices of observing animal behavior, feeding rates, those type of activities that we can empower, that we know are already being done on the farming community. But if we can then also build into that practice the routine screening of moribund animals when they occur on the farm, those are the highest value animals that we can be doing diagnostics on to assure and verify that we don't have any of these listed pathogens, that we are finding health issues early on in the course of a disease event as well there. And so we've allowed a risk credit by reviewing the practices that are done for early detection on each of our farms. When we get into the different participation options, we'll talk about official surveillance versus routine surveillance that is done within those different participation options. All right. So what does CAHPS participation look like? We'll have annual site visits by APHIS that are subject to user fees. That is no different than how we handle our other inspection practices for our programs. Our veterinary service inspectors will have a mobile app that we are working on to develop. The information collection packet has already been out for public comment. We received no comments back for that and is now being reviewed by OMB so that we have the authority to collect this information from our farming community participants. And then, of course, the great thing about this app is that it will generate annual reports for participants. It will generate a map with the different locations, and then we can annotate those maps with how animals, equipment, stuff are moving around the farm so that, again, we are making sure that the biosecurity practices match the risk level for these different pathogens and the farming practices in place. Also, at certain levels of CAHPS participation, it is necessary for us to check in with the aquatic animal health team with the CAHPS program to make sure that by the 6-month mark, our testing and diagnostics that need to be done throughout a calendar year to hit the desired health target, that we aren't waiting until the last bit of the year to submit all 350 samples at once. We want to make sure, again, that the surveillance plan that is implemented on the farm is reflective of the entire calendar year, the seasonal changes that might impact susceptibility to pathogen infections, that it also covers the entire population or populations that are being represented on the farm under the CAHPS program. So that, again, we have a very comprehensive look, both in terms of targeted surveillance, but also early disease detection surveillance. And we need that 6-month check-in to make sure that at the end of that calendar year, we're not behind in where our sampling needs to be. We also have the flexibility within some of our participation options to designate who approved sample collectors are and where those samples should be going for testing. This is not for every level, but in turn addressing the integrity piece about this program so that our trading partners and everybody else knows that APHIS is aware who is collecting those samples, that person has been appropriately trained on how to do aquatic animal sample collection, that they are able to identify distinct populations or population on a farm, that they are able to do a biosecurity evaluation around that population unit to assure that those practices are in place, and that once those samples are collected, the security of that lot or farm is in place to ensure that those test results have that validity over time. And again, we want to make sure that the pooling and assay method used in our official surveillance practices are where they need to be in terms of a approved assay or a WOA equivalent type assay that is being used by our labs that are participating in an annual proficiency testing panel as well. Also, depending on the participation level in CAHPS, it is possible over time that participants will be able to reduce the sampling requirement while still maintaining that health status designation. So again, this checks that box about being able to eventually minimizing the impact of testing healthy animals to demonstrate health from our participating farms. All right, so here are our CAHPS participation options. We've got CAHPS enrolled. These would be farms that are new, haven't really done any of this testing before that needs to be done. or in some kind of provisional trial basis that way. Then we have our CAHPS farm participants, and these active participants would be folks that either don't move live animals off the farm, or are moving intrastate where there are no additional health requirements needed by this farm. And so you'll see at the CAHPS farm level, there is no official surveillance, and there are no other criteria about collectors, what labs they have to use, that kind of thing. Of course, these farms would have to implement all levels of the CAHPS program, the 5 pillars, but only to a certain degree. The next option here is CAHPS National, where we begin to introduce this idea of official surveillance, again, that has the bookends of a recognized collector. Samples are being sent to a approved testing lab. Those types of criteria are in place. Then we have CAHPS Global, which is an active participant that is going that extra mile, perhaps for international trade, and they need that high health status of 95% confidence that a pathogen exists at that 2% or lower assumed pathogen prevalence level. So we'll be able to verify that. And then we know in the United States, we have a number of companies that have parent companies, sister companies, other entities in other countries that want to send broodstock, young life stages into the United States, into a CAHPS recognized facility. And so how do we connect or network these facilities together when we know right now we don't have import controls that would match this level of CAHPS participation at the demonstrated freedom level? And so we are designing this program. It is purely in place to assist these companies that are in this situation, but also our state partners, so that states can simply look at the CAHPS program, identify and verify in partnership with APHIS that all the criteria are being met in the facility in another country and are equitable and equal or higher than the health standard for the participant here in the United States. It's a really exciting series of options, and hopefully speaks to the flexibility of this program that farmers can build and design with their aquatic animal health teams what their participation looks like. All right, so here's just a quick chart. Again, these slides in this talk will be available to you. I do reserve the right that this may not be the final version of what all this looks like. But again, we've given some different options within the different levels of participation, what this might look like. You'll note within the national option participation that we've got 2 ways to do this. One is the confidence or output way to do it, and the other is a count or input-based sampling target. This affords the opportunity, particularly in the United States, for entities that might be using the AFS Blue Book standard, where 60 fish per lot have to be tested in order to move into or to engage in interstate movement that way. So we allow both of those options here, and you'll see if you elect to do the count-based, there are some impacts to that decision that you won't be eligible down the road for demonstrated freedom unless you move to the more confidence-based output sampling target paradigm that way. All right, and we're going to talk about some of these acronyms. DP means design prevalence. And so again, the aquatic animal health team, based on the needs of the participating farm, establish what that health target is. Is it a 95% confidence of 2% assumed pathogen prevalence level, 5%, 10%? And again, that declaration of design prevalence allows entities like APHIS or a state partner to validate that the testing practices, the sampling of numbers, all contribute and meet and hit that target. Without having an identified target, we really don't know where we are. The lab reports oftentimes do not indicate what the diagnostic sensitivity of an assay might be. They may not indicate how animals were pooled. They may not indicate the number of animals in the sampling population. So again, to clearly establish that design prevalence level is a key part of this. Also, we've already talked about the early detection systems that are in place on the farm, and we have a way to attribute points to that effort on the farm. So again, it empowers those practices, and that goes to being able to reduce the sampling over time. We also in this table are introducing MIR. MIR are managed introduction risks. And this goes into how we are evaluating the biosecurity plans for each one of the risk pathways for each pathogen that is the named pathogen of concern for the facility. CAHPS is based on a decision tree metric for pathogen introduction risks. And so each one of these pathways is evaluated for each pathogen that is designated as of concern for the participating facility. So for example, if we've got a koi goldfish facility and their pathogens of concern are spring viremia of carp, koi herpes virus. Those are the two big ones, perhaps, for the international folks. And so for each koi herpes virus, how are waters, animals, feed, vectors, and fomites? What is our security of each one of those pathways? And then for spring viremia of carp, we go down the same decision metric for each one of those pathogens. So those are our 5 risk pathways that are involved in the risk evaluation pillar for CAHPS. And so again, for every named pathogen, for each one of these pathways, that assessment or risk evaluation is conducted. Of course, the output from that effort is the biosecurity plan, which details all the practices and justifications for why those practices are in place, why those practices are done perhaps at one structure on the farm and not the other, that type. And so we are helping farms build a really robust and meaningful biosecurity plan that echoes and addresses all the risks that might be present from the movement or introduction of animals, water, feed, movement of fomites, vectors that might be a concern for the facility. All right, so each one of those then pathways are scored for each pathogen, and then that calculation goes into, is this farm eligible for testing or sampling reductions? And if so, to what level? And we'll talk about that in a second. We also know that today at 5 o'clock, something somewhere is going to happen. A pump's going to go down. New animals are going to be introduced, and my phone will ring eventually. And so what do we do in those cases, particularly for our CAHPS participants that have made an enormous event, not enormous, but an investment into participating in CAHPS? We want to be very careful that because they might have a detection of one pathogen, it doesn't completely impact the health status of other pathogens that are part of the package. So again, we will handle these detections on a case-by-case basis for our participants, and then work with that entity and their aquatic animal health team to make sure that the steps are taken to assure that once the health issue is resolved, that we go through the appropriate sampling procedures to get that health status restored to that participant. So just because you have a detection of one of the pathogens in your packet doesn't necessarily mean that you won't be able to move your animals, or you won't be able to continue business as normal. Again, it's really going to depend on the scope and the scale and the type of pathogen detection that is made. All right, so these are just some examples of some of these decision metrics. I've elected to show you just three today because of the interest of time, but you can see some of the thought processes from the APHIS side on how we will be evaluating these packets. And we have a CAHPS workbook that is designed to help aquatic animal health teams go through these questions and these pathways in a uniform and consistent manner, such that everybody is doing it exactly the same way. And then, of course, when we are making these final decisions of whether a pathway is secure, or is it being sufficiently managed or mitigated, or perhaps the pathway is not being managed and it is determined to be insufficient for that pathogen, for that pathway. And so you'll see then, depending on the risk pathway, you can have a blend of answers here, right? So maybe your water pathway is completely secure, but your animal pathway is mitigated because you ask for health certificates, or you've got similarly susceptible species coming in, that kind of thing. So it's very, it can be designed to each entity very uniquely that way. Here's one for the introduction of animals into a CAHPS facility. And again, either for the secured pathway, animals are sourced internally from the same CAHPS participant. We should be recognized that as an equal health status, right? Or you've got these hard breaks and you're in a system where we've got an absence of susceptible species. So there's no reason for us to believe that the pathogen of concern would be in these areas. Or you need to mitigate the pathway by asking for health certificates and assure that any animals coming onto the farm that are susceptible to the same pathogens are equal of higher health status. And I think I have one more here on feed. Again, looking at those 5 pathways. So again, this metric of how we would rate this pathway, and APHIS is confirming what the aquatic animal health team is providing to us as justification for either it is a secure pathway or a managed pathway. All right, so how do we do this? And please know the numbers in this current table we are still working on. We have provided, and we're hopeful that cooperative agreements with some of our collaborators will help us to hone this system down even better. But of course, to be able to do this, we need to weight each one of those pathways. So I think probably all of us would uniformly agree that the greatest risk to a farm is the movement of animals and water as introductions to that farm. And so those pathways would be weighted in terms of it would have a higher score that way. So again, for us to do this, it's a numbers game a little bit, but just so that you appreciate what this table is saying, that 8% on the top row there really translates to an acceptable target. And what that 8% essentially translates to is that as a entity, as a community of the United States, we are comfortable that a detection of one of these pathogens could be assumed to occur once every 12 years. And that seems to be our comfort level for the moment. And so anything that sits right at that 8% level or lower, we are able to then adjust the sampling targets over time so that this continued sampling of healthy animals, 350 every year, we can begin to get out from underneath that pressure by assuring that the sampling frequency, the sampling numbers, as well as the biosecurity and early detection practices are in place and verified, that they are occurring with the robustness that we are looking for in order to support a decision metric such as this. All right, and again, we know that one of the asks was, how do we create a more efficient system to test our animals? And again, by looking at the design prevalence, the managed introduction risks for each of those pathways as either secure, managed, or insufficient, and then what is the farm doing routinely outside these more official or structured surveys of animal health? What are they doing routinely to evaluate animal health and early detection of diseases? And so we can give credits that way. And then we can reduce the amount of sampling over time without compromising the status of the 2%, 5% health targets that have been declared. All right, so what does CAHPS do for us? It provides oversight and recognition from USDA as the animal health competent authority in the United States, that the health claim statuses are being met. It boosts confidence and confidence continuity, which is perhaps maybe even a little bit more important. We want confidence that our test results have meaning over time. What we want to avoid is that once those samples are collected from the farm and they leave the farm, those results are only as good as the moment of time that they were collected in. When we have the additional metric of early disease detection, biosecurity practices, an aquatic animal health team, risk evaluation, we've really got a way to, again, have that confidence maintained over a longer period of time, so that we know that animals are moving safely. It creates a consistent process for inspection, not only for USDA, but also for any of our state or global partners that are recognizing this program. And of course, it provides the opportunity for our farming communities to create a network through connected entities that can be recognized as equal health status for movement purposes. All right, so this is the dream, right, you guys? And I realize we've already been on a really long road, but we've still got some way to go. But really, and this is perhaps without my APHIS hat on, but this is the dream. And certainly from my experience in studying the industry, studying how aquatic animals move domestically and internationally, this is where I think we need to go and how we need to help our farming community and our regulatory thinkers get there. Farm-raised aquatic animals must be recognized and regulated as livestock. We need state departments of agriculture to embrace aquaculture and farm-raised aquatic animals as livestock, and we need to create and support a definition of what aquatic livestock are. If you look at our poultry program and the WOA definition of poultry versus non-poultry, we need to do something the same for aquatic livestock here in the United States. What that does is protect our farming spaces from the other more unusual spaces, but also that have risk of pathogen introduction. And those detections in these non-farming spaces can impact our farming community. One, by posing a threat to production because of animal health, but also because these detections do not necessarily, right now, they're in the same aquatic animal space. We need detections in public aquariums, detections in home aquariums to be completely separate from the farming practices and farming community. So we need to protect that. And certainly once CAHPS is regulated as a codified program, we need to ensure that these the farming space is protected and identified as separate from these other spaces that USDA may not have authority over. And also, we have no control over disease introduction, control, or mitigation in those spaces either. Let's see. We need states and international entities to recognize CAHPS as a codified and USDA supported program. We really need to get away from killing healthy animals to demonstrate health. Aquaculture is the only commodity right now that has to use that paradigm. And the reasons for that are we don't have a lot of non-lethal testing options for the animals that are being moved around, but we need to support research into that kind of stuff. We also have these tests right now that are testing for a single pathogen one at a time, which on these loads of healthy animals, and we have to test that many healthy animals because we're essentially looking for a needle in the haystack, right? So we need multiplex assays that can test simultaneously for multiple pathogens in one sample. And of course, we need to prioritize the testing of sick animals over the testing of healthy animals. And hopefully CAHPS will begin to drive us. And we see this change already shifting at the global level too, where really we want to emphasize the testing and diagnostics of animals that are displaying clinical signs. Not only are those animals the best indicator of health status on the farm, but they're stressed, right? And so whether it's a non-infectious cause, once those animals are stressed, they are, again, this very valuable item, I guess, on the farm that can give us the most bang for the information that we're paying for. We need to ensure that animals are moving on health certificates and not lab results alone. The evaluation of a lab report is not the same thing as understanding the epidemiology, the biosecurity, the population or health status from which these animals came. A lab report, again, by itself is as good as that snapshot in time, unless we have a process in place that has meaningful language and verifiable language. We are simply moving fish with pieces of paper, which I really hope we begin to alter and change that. And of course, lastly, we need confidence in livestock health, and we need that confidence to be longer lived than, again, the moment in time that we collect those samples. Testing alone does not do that. Testing alone is the verification that everything else is working, but we need to know what those other things are: biosecurity, early detection, pooling of samples. How is that all being done? And are we sure that we are not compromising one aspect of the testing process that might come back to bite us? So again, I realize I have about 10 minutes left here. Just to preempt any frequently asked questions, when can I start participating in CAHPS? As I mentioned at the start, CAHPS is entering the federal rulemaking process. The codification process is a lengthy one. So we are still likely years away from a codified CAHPS program. And once we do have that codified program, official enrollment will begin. What I do encourage you, though, I've dropped the QR code down at the bottom of this page. Check back, and I'm sure USAS, NAA will help us launch the message when the comment period for this program is open. Please take advantage of providing those comments. We cannot do this without our partners from the farming community, the state, other federal partners as well. And so this is a plan intended for all of us to use. What can I do to prepare for CAHPS? Well, assemble your aquatic animal health team. Determine these questions that we're going to ask. What are your pathogens of concern? What is your target design prevalence level? Conduct an internal biosecurity review, and I'm happy to share the CAHPS workbook if that helps people kind of begin to think uh, in this type of metric? Are you secure, mitigated, or insufficient, and more work needs to be done? Really identify these SOPs for disease investigation. We all know that in agriculture, animals die. It's part of the process. We want to obviously limit that. But when mortality or morbidity events surpass that normal background level, what is the participants' intended response? How do you do hold movements? How do you continue an investigation on a disease lot? How do you investigate health outbreaks on the farm? It's those types of things. When you have a detection of a WOA listed pathogen, how is your aquatic animal health team going to report that to the appropriate authorities? And again, be mindful that for some of the participation options in CAHPS, for example, the global level or the national level at that 2% with 95% confidence, that takes about 2 years for you to establish that health history that we can then verify, yes, you have demonstrated freedom with this amount of criteria. So if you think that that's the option and where your company wants to go, we should start today beginning to look at what that surveillance plan looks like for those pathogens. And of course, hopefully all of you know that if there are any questions or comments, there's my email. Please contact me. I love nothing more than talking about CAHPS. And so with that, Dave and everybody, thank you so much again for this opportunity. I love talking about this program, and thank you to all my vet services colleagues that have helped get it this far, as well as the NAA working group members that help support this as well. And also, happy Mother's Day to any mothers out there. And also, gents, a reminder, it's Mother's Day, y'all. All right, Dave, thanks so much.